Welcome to this Dead Zone Pandemic Files number 2. Back again. So I'm Andy from Weight of Fire, and I'm joined by Ian Davies, UK National Deadzone Champion. He was with me last time. Hello, Ian. You all right?
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, he likes rats, by the way. He likes being there. And also we're both joined by Claudio MacShephard, who has the least German-sounding name ever, but actually...
Actually, MacShephard isn't my real name, but Schäfer. But for all the non-German viewership, I thought I'll do like a more English or British or Scottish version. So,
so anyway, Claudio, welcome on board. Claudio is a big fan of Dead Zone. I'm going to say Dead Zone Germany National Champion. Okay, so yeah, Claudio's come from. Joined us via the medium of the internet today through from Bavaria, and yeah, we've known each other for a little while, haven't we? You've been over to some events over here in the UK, and you're a big contributor to Dead Zone sort of conversations. So you're here to give us a little bit of one of your favourite subjects, which is a bit of fluff and the lore, but also you're a good player because you came second only to Ian himself at last year's WAFCON, which was makes you the second best in Britain. How about that? That's pretty impressive.
But even in Britain.
Yeah,
true. It doesn't work like that, does it? Anyone who says it does, it's just like madness. Competition took place in Britain. Therefore, second best in Britain.
Yeah, I've just didn't want to be the UK national champion as a German. So
absolutely, be embarrassing
because of our history. Yeah, so
no way. Imagine.
So second place is like. We're more comfortable.
Thanks for letting me have that one. Appreciate it.
Yeah. But anyway, welcome, Claudio. Thank you very much for joining us. So yeah. Oh, you'd have to come back a bit. You can't see it. You can't see it. It says second place, though, doesn't it? It says second. First loser. So yeah, we are. Last time we did a little bit of like an intro to Dead Zone, really, and a sort of summary of what you might need to get started, because a lot of new people joining Dead Zone community at the moment, and we pointed out some good resources for that. So hopefully people watch that one. And this time we're going to start. So we're going to start going through a few of the factions. We'll see how many we get through. We're going to give a little bit of sort of lore and fluff to them, and then we're going to talk about play style as well, aren't we? And maybe sort of point out some of the good things and some of the bad things, I guess, as well, about how each of the factions will play. So you can choose your own play style, really, which faction would suit you the best from the sort of the models available and how they work in games. So yeah, it sounds like enough, doesn't it? I think that'd be enough for one night.
Let's crack on.
Yeah,
absolutely. So Ian, what is that in front of you for a start? You seem to have a whole bunch of plastic stuff in front of you.
Well, Andy, you're somewhere near Manchester. Claudio, you're in Bavaria. I come to you from within the Dead Zone.
Yeah, the wasteland that is.
Nottingham.
Yeah,
where it all started.
Absolutely.
Where it all started.
Right in the middle of the lead belt, yeah. So yeah, you got your Dead Zone terrain out there. I sort of always picture that Ian lives like this, actually.
My entire house is made out of battle zones.
Yeah. You have a bunk bed.
Might be better built if it was.
Yeah. I don't know if everybody knows, but Ian coined the hashtag Dead Zone is life. I don't know if that's known by most people, but not everybody, I don't think so.
It's not about taking credit for that, you know. I was inspired by the Le Mans movie. Racing is life. So
really?
I just adapted it for purposes.
Okay. It means nothing to me.
Well, if ripping off Steve McQueen is what's necessary, then so be it.
Do whatever you want. So,
well, it's true though. It's true.
Dead Zone is
life. Yeah.
Well,
no,
it might be death if you don't get out.
Right, way to bring the mood down, Andy. We talk about the enforcers.
Let's talk about the enforcers. Let's move on. So, enforcers. So that's the first faction we're going to talk about. It's sort of the classic, isn't it? You can see them behind me, here, there, whichever way they are. Behind Claudio as well. Enforcers. So these are your ubiquitous sort of heroic humanoids, aren't they, really, of the Warpath universe, of which Deadzone is set in. So, Claudia, you're going to give us a little bit of a sort of a summary, really, of who the Enforcers are and what they stand for, I guess, and then we'll talk about the models and so on.
Yeah, it's just a short overview to know what we're talking about if we're going to rules and synergies and stuff. So the Enforcers are the military arm of the GCPS, of the Council of Seven, the GCPS being the Galactic Co-Prosperity Sphere. So the human nations, so to say, the human corporations who work together or against each other, and they have elected 7 members to form the council, and the council needs a private army to ensure that their authority is also applied. So there come in the Enforcers, and those aren't just like the normal type of hired guns or military forces. They're more like super soldiers who act with an extreme application of violence and are known for like tactics of overkill, and are feared for that because half of the time they don't even have to fight because they're used as a propaganda tool to instill fear in rebellions or other races. So they don't even have to fight to win battles, so to say. They're also called as posthumans because they were made by scientists, bioengineered to make them better than a normal human to withstand all the struggles you can go against if you're going to fight some aliens and other races. And they mostly are the ones who enforce the dead zones over planets before or when they go dark. So these are the peacekeepers, but also the brutal oppressors, if you want to call them that way, either if you're part of the GCPS or an alien race, which is just being wiped out by their excessive use of force and weaponry and advanced technology. So as you can see, they are clad in some kind of powered armor to help them withstand attacks from other races, lower races, and other humans who don't maybe do as the council wills.
Yeah, I think that's really good, Claudio. Thank you. I think that's the key thing, isn't it? That there are lots and lots of human soldiers, mostly employed as like planetary defense and stuff like that by corporations. Everything's run by corporations, but these enforcers are the private army of the Council of Seven, aren't they? So they would rarely be seen. You go through your entire life on a GCPS world and you'd never see an enforcer, but when they arrive and they literally sort of come do what they meant to do, and then they leave, and whether you're still alive or not at the end is debatable. Yeah. But
you know them from posters or maybe ads or something like that, but hopefully you never see them face to face because mostly it's the last thing.
And because of that, they're actually they're sort of a fast strike thing, aren't they? They don't come, I mean, more sort of in the Warpath stuff. They don't have massive tanks and things. They are like clinical excision sort of operations they do, and they go in, they've got the best kits. They're like the Navy SEALs, I guess, aren't they? It's like the sort of special forces of the future. Going in with all the best kit, all the best guys, best training, and they go in, they do the stuff, and then they leave. So they're certainly nasty pieces of work. So
highly mobile, which also is reflected
absolutely.
in the rules, which we're like tackling later on. But that's like the go in, go out, leave nothing behind, but ashes. So that's maybe the slogan. No slow tanks or something like that. Everything is just airdropped and.
And I guess that sort of fits with the key things for the enforcers is that the vast majority of them are armored, aren't they? There are a few that don't have armor, but 90% of the faction has some armor, which is not common actually for most of the Deadzone factions. And also large numbers of them have got jump packs as well. You talked about there, and it's their sort of their fast deployment coming down and stuff like that. So they are quite versatile in how they get around the battlefield and their survivability. So yeah, they're quite impressive sort of soldiers. Interestingly, their kit's mostly made by the Forge Fathers, isn't it? In the fluff, which is means they get the best stuff. And there's always this question as to whether the Forge Fathers have sort of tampered with it. So there's some sort of special, you can't quite copy it. You have to sort of buy it direct from the Forge Fathers themselves. So
it's all copyrighted. Yeah,
absolutely, it's all copyrighted. Yeah. It's got an expiry date.
Yeah, after 2 years, everything broke.
Yeah.
But I think that's an interesting point. If we are talking about fluff, not every race is at war with each other from the beginning, or so there are maybe some clusters who fight against each other, who clan lords from the Forge Fathers to fight the GCPS. But then again, mostly the galaxy tries to get along or get together and trade federations or trading. So you can see the enforcers have the best armor made and inspired by the Forge Fathers, which they are fighting too. So it all depends, and it's not only war the whole time.
Yeah. So who regularly plays Enforcers or has regularly played Enforcers? If you, Claudio, you play them?
I'm not playing them that often, but I'm playing against them pretty often because one of my friends I'm playing is always playing Enforcers. So, but I've played them a few times. To be sure.
I've not really ever played them much. I know you have, though, Ian. You used to play them quite a lot, didn't you?
Yeah, well, because I started Deadzone version 1, the Enforcers and the Plague were the two factions in the version 1 starter box. So they were what I got painted up first. And when version 2 came along, we started attending some tournaments. Either Enforcers or Plague were my first choice. So I have played with the Enforcers there, but yeah.
So if you were to sort of sum up their play style, what would you say?
Well, you're going to have a small number of models, but they're going to be better at doing
everything.
Primarily shooting than everyone else. Shooting and surviving is what their primary points are. Like you say, a lot of them have got armor. They also survive very well, and they shoot very well. So you're going to be more effective at putting out damage and taking it.
So they generally shoot and survive on 4s, don't they? Which is obviously better than average. What they aren't good at, as you suggested there, is they're not the best at fighting. They're not terrible, but they're not the best. There are many. They don't have a real sort of designated close combat option, do they? They sort of do. They have some close combat guys who are pretty good, actually, but you certainly wouldn't. It's not their go-to thing, is it?
If they find themselves in combat, they're getting bogged down at that point.
Yeah,
it's bad news for them
because they're just so much better at shooting.
Yeah.
So you
close combat specialists are good close combat fighters, but if you compare them to the really good close combat fighters many other armies have, they aren't as good. They can't just do the damage. They can survive. They can help shield the rest of the team. You need to go into the field to get the objectives, etc. So you maybe need them, but they aren't the ones where you build your tactic on to crush your enemy in close combat.
The other thing they've got large sort of options of is different types of weapons as well. They've probably got some of the widest range of weapons of any of the factions, actually, from their normal jangling laser rifles up to missile launchers, burst lasers, which are sort of suppression weapons. They've got fusion guns and shotguns and thermal rifles. They've got thermal mines.
Well, probably the most iconic one, tag rifles.
Tag rifles, yeah. Incinerators. I mean, they've literally got all the toys, haven't they?
I think the only toy they don't have are indirect weapons. They have only one option for that, but usually they don't use that. So the more direct shooting in your face is the Enforcer style.
Yeah, and because they shoot so well, actually, that sort of works in their favor, because indirect weapons you don't need to be a great shooter to use them in game, because you only need usually 1, maybe 2 successes to hit the target cube. So having a shoot value of 4 is sort of not 100% necessary. I mean, 5 is fine. You rarely miss with a GCPS mortar even. But yeah, I think you're right. That having all the toys, and then they also have options of more toys for armor as well. So they can take defender shields, which you can see behind me here on one of the models, which increases their armor. They've got some heavily armored infantry types as well in the Peacekeepers. Plus you can take, like this guy. Plus you've got options for medics, engineers. So that, again, that sort of option of pretty much a faction that does everything it wants to on the table. There's not really anything left uncovered by it. And the engineer particularly, he can bring little portable guns as well, sentry guns, so you can even get more shooting with less models on the table. So they really are a Swiss Army knife, aren't they?
Yeah, the problem is you'll never be able to put them all on the table at the same time because they're too expensive.
Yeah. So
they're good, that good, but they cost their points.
So I guess that's an interesting thing, isn't it, about Deadzone, is that having expensive models and low model counts in your faction is a good thing and a bad thing, because it's a good thing because you finish early, which means you get to start the next round early, which means you're often killing the one thing you want to kill. But the downside is your opponent can often make you do stuff before you're ready to, by sort of moving his chaff stuff around, and then you have to use your better stuff before he reveals his one thing you do want to kill or something like that. So it's a bit of a sort of a yin-yang of how that sort of game works, isn't it? That you react to each other. I
think a key point to remember when you're playing forces is that you can pass. That if your opponent has got a load of chaff units to move around, then feel free to pass and let him do 2 or 3 of them, so you can get a better idea of what he's up to, and then act with your important model.
I think that's a really important thing. When you start playing, I don't think many people realise they can pass to start with, and so you churn through your stuff, and then, like you say, then you've got he brings out his guy that's actually really quite good, but also quite vulnerable, perhaps, and then does some good stuff with him, whereas you wouldn't have done that if he'd known you've got models left to go. And also good use of your being careful of your extra activations that you've got left, or he has left, your opponent has left, so that you know that, oh, hang on, I could finish the round first, but he's got extra activations. So if he plays them in sequence, actually he'll jump ahead of me and steal the round off me. And so that keeping an eye on what your opponent's command does, this is just a general, it's not just about the forces, is a sort of technique that when you've been playing for a little while, you sort of get used to. Any other things about the enforcers? What else have they got that's quite cool? They've got jet bikes. They're quite smart. They look very smart. They're a little trickier to use in Deadzone, if I'm honest. They're very fast, which is good for some scenarios, but they're perhaps a little fragile for the points.
I think the biggest problem with jet bikes is if you're fast with them, you're needing your 2 actions, so you can't shoot. If you have a shoot dice, you still can, but without any command dice, you can either be fast or shoot. Yeah. And that's a bit of the tricky point where you really have to think what you need in that certain situation.
Yeah. I think if you know what mission you're playing, they can be really, really useful, because there's a couple of missions where movement is really good. And certainly if you're playing on larger mats, like in Escalation, there are 2 mat games and stuff like that, they could be really important in games like that. But in a standard 2-foot-by-2 foot, 8x8 mat, they sometimes don't really sort of get the time. So what else? What about striders? They get nice striders, don't they? Lots of people get nice striders. What are the advantages of a strider?
Well, it's going to be better at shooting. I mean, the thing with striders all too often is you're just rolling 3 dice, because it might be more difficult to get height because of their size. You're not able to fit them with holoscopes, things like that, to give them extra dice. But if you're rolling 4s to hit with, then it could do some good work. So
yeah, it's the best shooty strider around, to be honest. And you have many, many options, like with the other striders, for anti-tank weaponry, a suppressive weaponry, an extra shield for more tankiness to really soak all the attention and bullets from the opponent, and even offensive potential with the frag spear. So they are really, you can do anything you want with the strider, which is a really good thing for the enforcers. But biggest problem maybe is it's also the most expensive of all the striders available in an expensive army to begin with. So it's always the balance of bringing which models to bring, a few numbers, a few of the bigger pieces.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? Some armies you could even run 2 striders if you really wanted to, but you can't do that in enforcers. They're just too expensive. But they are pound for pound the best of all of them. You know, they shoot better than any other strider, so that's what you're paying for, really. Is that? Striders are a funny one as well because they are quite a big point sink. So at 200 points, they're a pretty good bet. 150, you sometimes make the cut, don't they? But less than 150 points, you're not typically running them in any faction. Certainly not in the enforcers because, like you say, your other troops are too expensive. The other thing we haven't mentioned is the Pathfinders, haven't we? So Pathfinders are an infantry unit, lightly armoured. These are your sort of scouting troops, and they have the tag rifles that we mentioned briefly before. So they play quite interestingly, don't they? So what are the cool things about Pathfinders?
Well, they've still got the good survival of 4+, but they've not got the armour that a lot of the other units have. The tag rifle is their key feature. So as a special action, they can effectively mark an enemy unit, and that enables anyone with a tag rifle to get an extra dice when they're shooting at it. So if you take 2 or 3 of them in combination, they could really nail even a big target in one turn.
Yeah, and I think that's where their real value is, that they can scout up as well, so they can move up position as well, so gaining height and things like that before they do anything. I think those are the sort of real advantages there, that they can get in good positions, but they are fragile, aren't they? And certainly when I face them with my Veermen, they're my go-to target if I see them, because they're quite nice for victory points. They're easy to remove if you can get in on amongst them. And yeah, you can nullify that really useful shooting that they have. So getting rid of them becomes priority for me, typically.
Do you want to talk about the leaders?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, I mean, as with any Dead Zone strike team, you pick your leader to inform and complement the rest of your strike team. So with that in mind, there is a Pathfinder Sergeant, which enables you to, as a splat ability, enables you to do extra tag abilities. So it works particularly well with taking other Pathfinders in your force. He scouts as well. He's just a slightly better Pathfinder. The Enforcer Sergeant talks to what Claudio was saying about the mobility of the Enforcers. So spending a splat from the Enforcer Sergeant enables you to make a free move or sprint with any model with a jump pack, which is most of the Enforcers in armour. Really, really good for your heavy weapon troops. So snipers and missile launch in particular, where shooting is normally a long action, enables you to move 2 spaces, get that height, get into a better position, and still make that shot. Really, really useful. He's probably my favourite leader out of the choices. Number 3 is the Enforcer Captain. This guy's your number 1 choice for 2 extra command dice. He's got that Tactician too. What is it? It enables you to reroll survive rolls for his splat ability. So he makes your Enforcers who are surviving on 4s, they've got armor, and now they're re-rolling survive rolls as well. Just make your guys ultra survivable. And the big guy, the Peacekeeper Captain, for when armor 1 just isn't enough, he's got extra armor, he's got armor 2, he's got extra size as well, so he's got an extra wound on him. He's got a wrist blade for combat ability. It's not great still, he's still in fighting on 5s, but he's got a survival of 3+. Survives on 3s, 2 armor.
I don't think I've ever killed one.
I have run him, and he can die, but he takes some doing.
Yeah. He's one of those models that you see on the other side of the table, and I just say, well, I'm going to ignore him and kill everybody else.
Yep. And of course, what's his splat ability? He adds extra armor and resilient, which is re-rolling a survive dice.
Yeah. He's a proper sort of keep my army alive around me guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
And he can even get a shield so that the defender shield to get even more armor and give the armor to everyone else in the cube too. So can really be a bastion of your complete strike team there.
Yeah, no, it's criminal.
But he's really, really expensive, and
yeah, that's his downside, isn't it?
Costs like the double the points of like the Pathfinder Sergeant.
Yeah, he's about 50-ish, isn't he? Something like that.
44. He's like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing, obviously, with those splats that you're talking about, when we say splat, we mean the command faction or whatever it's called. Special ability, that's it. Sorry. When we say that, you can't choose then, though. The way the command dice works in Deadzone is so you look at those splats and you go, oh, great, brilliant, but they may never come up because or they may come up at the wrong times because it's about how you roll your dice. And so, although you can have these great options, if they don't come at the right time, then it doesn't necessarily help you. So it's always worth bearing in mind the vagaries of the way command dice work, and that you roll them and damn it, now I've got all the things I didn't want this round, I wanted next round. That's one of the joys of it as well. So,
I mean, you can also play if you're just rolling extra fight dice. That's not great.
Yeah, absolutely. Not your day, is it? I want the shoots, damn it. So that was the enforcers. I think we've covered them very nicely there. Anything else we need to add on them?
Maybe I think they have many named characters, living legends. The ones with the one in brackets. And they have a few of them who do things the enforcers usually are able to. One is a forward observer with the only indirect weapon, which we mentioned before. The other is a melee specialist who can hold his own pretty much against everything else. So they have a few options there, maybe a bit more than many other armies. But then again, most of them are really, really expensive. Yeah. So it's hard to bring them on the field and field them effectively in the end.
All of those living legends are quite expensive. I mean, I think Rocker is probably one of the... If I had to pick one, he's probably the best because he's an enforcer with scout and a sniper rifle. And you're like, well...
And also the most expensive.
Yes. But there's nothing not to love from that, though. It's like, shoots on 4s, will guarantee gets height, has 2 extra dice as well. You're like, well... I'm eliminating at least something, possibly 2 things round 1.
As the epitome of what the enforcers stand for in terms of their shooting ability, right, yes. I think Howlett's a good choice though, because he's covering one of the most obvious weaknesses. You can use him as like a ranging bulldog trying to cut off enemy melee units coming towards you. He'll deal with them big time.
And he's totally iconic as well as Howlett. I mean, he's the absolute epitome of what an enforcer's can do, isn't he? He's like a hero amongst heroes. Good. Right. So I think we'll leave that there for the enforcers. So next faction we're going to talk about is the Plague. Oh, Claudio, very nice. Very nice. So the Plague, another classic or iconic Deadzone faction from first edition. Probably the one that excited most people, I would think, in first edition. Yeah, and certainly was quite sort of novel and interesting, their approach. It does look like your face, doesn't it, Ian? Quite terrible.
Oh, you're looking lovely.
Yeah. So, yeah, the Plague. So they're an interesting one. So, Claudio, tell me about the Plague.
Yeah, so in short, they are the stuff of nightmares. So these... things you see here are like the evil which is taking over worlds, and the dead zones are like made because of the Plague, often, not always. So these creatures come from a region known as the Death Arc, probably in the galaxy, a region where the Asterians reign. And the corporations, the human corporations, the greed propelled them forward to go there, even though the Asterians said that they shouldn't do it. But they never learn. So, and then the Plague broke loose amidst the ranks on the worlds, and no one knows what happened, and everything went dark. And then these creatures appeared, looking a bit like humans, but some more, some less.
Well, they are humans, aren't they?
Well, they were humans. Oh, not all, many were, like in these pictures here. But the problem is, like, some ancient artifacts are all over the galaxy on planets, and no one knows who put them there or where they're coming from. The Assyrians knew from this plague. The humans didn't, and now they know. Mostly only the elite know, because it's a well-kept secret. Also, the GCPS of the Council of Seven hope to keep it secret, but it's still whispered in spaceports and stuff. So no one knows exactly what they are like, but yeah, they are a threat, maybe one of the biggest threats to the galaxy, because they mutate one host, the one person who gets in contact with the relic, for example, and he mutates into that one big monstrosity, the Stage 1, which Ian showed us on the cover of the Nexus Psi from first edition. And then those can infect others. So, and in the end, you have the more human looking, like this one, the Stage 3. And those are maybe, they don't look like they are the most, the biggest threat, but they can be, because they still can drive vehicles, use weapons, and most importantly, use spaceships. So their aim is to infect a world, to destroy the defenders, to turn them, and then in the end fly away and infect more planets, because they are still intelligent. And it's not known how they really work, but they work together. They work as an intelligence species, and most alien races can be turned too. So there are plague teratons, for example, and some species are immune, like the Marauders, who can't be turned into plague victims.
Yeah, and they're pure destruction, aren't they? That's the danger, and that's why the sort of classic version 1 Dead Zone is plague gets onto a planet, lock it down now before it gets anywhere else. It's almost like there are similarities with where we are these days. You know, lock it down early so it doesn't spread anywhere. And that's what we talked about. The Enforcers, that's one of their primary roles in the sort of modern context of the Warpath universe, is to do exactly that, isn't it? To enforce those lockdowns, those dead zones. Yeah, and as you pointed out, you can see there's some dogs behind Claudio there, and there's some birds above him. So other animals can be infected, but they all become these almost mindless, slathering beasts, don't they? Bent purely on just killing and causing more infection in others. So they're pretty grim, aren't they? Pretty grim.
Yeah. Like Claudio says, there's sort of a ranking system that works. When whoever finds the relic first becomes the 1A. The 1A will kill lots of things, but a few things that survive will become the Stage 2s. And you see that in the game in the form of 2As, which are human, Stage 2 humans, 2Bs, which are the Bursters, the Teraton in the book as well, that's a Stage 2. And they go on and kill lots of things, but some of them survive and they become the Stage 3s, the next rank down. 3As for humans, 3Ds for dogs, murder birds. But some of the Stage 3s, they don't retain the intelligence and such to use weapons and vehicles and stuff, and they get designated the 3Zs, the plague zombies, because they've become less mindless.
Totally mindless. So I think one of the one of the sort of interesting things about the plague is that origin story of them, isn't it? It's like there's these artifacts, and it's not in any of the multitude of fluff as to where these artifacts actually come from, who put them there. The Assyrians know about them. Do the Assyrians know about them because they're just an old race and they know they're there, and so people go, or did they create them?
That's
my money's on the Asterians, actually.
No, I'm not buying that.
Yeah, I'm buying that.
They're evil
space elves.
Yeah, maybe they're thriving for balance because of the things they did.
Yeah,
like centuries ago.
Absolutely, they got a proper guilty conscience, haven't they?
Or maybe they defeated those ancient forces and now are the keepers of life and good. Who knows? Who knows?
Absolutely. So Plague, how do they play? What's the sort of meta of how they play in game?
Primarily, get forward and rip things up in hand-to-hand combat. That's the gist of it.
They're
You
pretty
can
aggro,
do
aren't they?
around the edges, but you're going to be looking at getting victory points by killing, and quite often you'll have a bigger body count in every sense than your opponent. So you'll have more models to throw forward onto objectives as well.
Yeah, so they're not the fastest, they're not the best in combat model for model, but there's lots of them and they're all good at those other things. They're not necessarily, they're not as good as Clichy in combat. They're not as fast as Vehement, but they've got components of all of that and they've got numbers as well, haven't they? So they're a really good aggro force, actually. And they can stick around a fair while, some of them as well. Some of them are quite tough as well. So what are the sort of different types? We've mentioned a few of them there, but there's a few. The 3As, let's start with 3As. So they're the sort of infantry on it. So they can fire weapons. That's one of the key things, including heavy weapons as well. So the only access they really have to support weapons is, and they all fit a certain ilk, don't they? They're not good shooters. So they're all about sort of pinning people, suppressing people, so that your fighters can then get in the mix.
It's about, we talked about how good the enforcers are. What you're shooting in the Plague list will do, it's rapid firing with your rifles, using HMGs and mortars to pin that enforcer sniper, that enforcer missile launcher, stop them shooting, stop them moving, the things they're good at, so that you can get forward and
all their supporters do that, don't they? I mean, they've got grenade launchers and flamers as well, haven't they? And all of them do exactly that same thing. They either pin or in some way disrupt and the other model's ability to do something.
And then again, if you're going into a fight and your opponent is pinned, you get an extra die. So it's not only impending movement, but it's also like, getting more out of a charge to be sure that you kill like an enforcer who can get a beating. But so it's really much about synergy. Maybe not too complicated synergy, because you shoot, you pin them down, and then you go into the faces and smash them. But then again, you have many tools which can be, the 3A can be outfitted to like match your play style even more. So I think they are really solid core and specialists.
I think when people play, they look at the 3A sometimes and think, oh, they're not great at most things, not great at shooting, but they do sort of sometimes forget that they're super fast. They're 2-3 movement, and they're no slouches in combat either. So for grabbing objectives and supporting other models, they are actually really quite good. And sometimes they get looked over a bit for some of the other troops, which maybe go to options for some Plague players. So particularly the dogs, which are often a sort of first pick, aren't they, when you're building a list, I think, for Plague, because they have the option of being very fast, of course, and speed 2-3. And they're quite cheap. They're 8 points, I think they're 8 points.
They're 6 points. It's a more points efficient way, because you're still getting that same speed and that same fight stat as you get from a 3A, but it's 4 points cheaper. So points wise, if you're focusing on that combat ability, it's more efficient. But the 3As, they've got rifles. Okay, they only shoot on 6s, but if you've got several of them, if you're rapid firing to pin things, if you're getting clear shots, yeah.
Which you can get with that speed. You can get those clear shots easier than many other armies. So or get on top of them.
They have another thing as well. They have opposable thumbs, so they can pick up frag grenades and stuff like that, which the dog can't. I mean, there are things that you can do with a 3A, even just any item for that matter. Picking up an ammo, even if you shoot on a 6, having an extra dice is definitely worth it if you find one on the floor. Same for intel and stuff like that. There are plenty of things listed over these dead zones that the dogs have just got to run past.
But the specialist version of 3A shoots better. They shoot on a 5+, so getting some cheap troops to then unlock your weapon specialists is it's quite often the way to go. Get those HMGs, get those grenade launchers.
So the other troops, or another one of the troops, are the really iconic ones for the Plague, are the 2As, aren't they? The Leapers, as they're known. So these used to be specialists. So if you're coming to this from even the beginning of 2nd edition, and without having got escalation, these have now moved into the troop category to give them a lot more versatility, and they've been buffed in how they fight. So they're quite good fighters. The big problem with the 2As is this rampage ability. So who wants to tell us about Rampage? The two-edged sword that is the Rampage ability.
So if a model with the Rampage ability is wounded during the course of the game, then the next, from that point onwards, every time they activate, you need to roll on the Rampage table. On a 1 or a 2, your opponent takes control of them, and that is extremely bad news because they're hench. They're going to rip things to pieces. 2As is bad. The Aberration, it's an absolute disaster because that thing is going to murder things.
Yeah, because not only does it obviously take that activation out of your... It's like a 3-hit badness, isn't it? It takes an activation because you've activated it. So you've wasted one of your activations. Then it goes and attacks one of your models, of course, because why wouldn't you? And then, of course, you may end up... You not only lost that model's activation, but you may well have lost a physical other model. Actually may have been ripped apart, was it? Or even if it's not ripped apart, it might be some way you've damaged it from doing what it wants to do or something like that. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Hilarious.
It can be a big downside because they could be a real liability.
And you can start how much they cost. So they're relatively cheap for what they do because of that. So, but yeah, Rampage is one of the few abilities that's negative, actually.
And you can start a chain reaction. Because rampaging
onto another
stage 2s can wound another one, which then has to test on Rampage. But then again, you can get faster with Rampage too, right? It's not only a negative. Yeah. So if you're feeling lucky, you can move 1 extra cube. So Rampage can be a good thing, but the gain isn't as good as the liability of losing an activation and probably also wounds on some models of your own.
Yeah, I mean, the extra move, I've rarely seen that make a difference because you're usually in a position to do something anyway. Because or you're too far away where it doesn't matter at all. So it's one of those two things, isn't it? That it might make a difference, but rampaging will always make a difference, no matter where you are.
It's much, much worse than the 7 or 8 result, which is a bit better.
Because if nothing else, even if you don't kill anything else, you've lost a model activation and it goes back to your opponent now to then get another go. So basically they get 2 goes and you've lost a model's use, even if you haven't lost an actual model. So yeah, rampaging is bad.
It's a world of pain. We get it. 2As are really good fighters though, fighting on 4s. With frenzy, and they're size 2, of course. So a lot of things they're charging into, they've got a size advantage. So you could be looking at 5 dice straight away, and with a reroll on 4s, pretty good, really good.
They don't seem to be picked as often as you'd think, which is strange because they are really good. And I think they weren't quite as good pre-escalation, but. They are a really good troop choice, I think, and certainly because there's so many things you can unlock, good specialists you can unlock. Now that they're a troop, that gives them a lot more versatility and letting you take the other cool stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think with a lot of factions it's the same, but with Plague, you're looking straight to the specialists page because there's so many goodies in there. Aberrations, Murderers, Terratons, Bursters, the Swarm. I mean, I talked about the Swarm on the first episode. It was incredibly powerful in version 1. Its second ed, it's still pretty good. Fights on 3s. It's on 3s with AP2. This thing is a real vehicle killer.
Acid bite.
Yeah.
It's
fragile. It's only surviving on 5s, but it has got tough as well.
When I take Plague, I usually take 2 Swarms. Yeah. I love them so much. They're great. Really good.
Phil.
Total filth. Aberration's a good one. So he's a huge model. Absolute sort of massive hulking brute of a model. A really nice model if you've got 1. rubbish model if you got 2, because he's not able to be posed in any other position, which is a bit frustrating.
There's no way you're taking 2 aberrations in a strike force. That'd be nuts.
Why wouldn't you?
They are only 40 points.
You
so
have
you
like
can
a 5
fit
model.
2 of them, no problem.
Yeah.
I can run 3, easy. Actually, we should do that one day, actually.
Yeah. Be that guy that turns up with the aberration.
Probably, I reckon you could, no, you wouldn't get 4, would you? You get 3 in, no problem.
No, you still
absolutely no problem, in fact, getting 3 in.
And then
You know
maybe
you
at
do.
this point, yeah, sorry. Ian.
You'd take the lieutenant, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
As your
take up the rampage.
that rampage and give him extra speed.
Absolutely.
That's what I wanted to talk about. Talking about rampaging 2As and the aberration, you have to talk about the lieutenant, because he's just the synergy piece for the big Gribbly army type of players.
Yeah, so that's what he was designed for, was to sort of mitigate the main downside of several plague models, which is the rampage, of course. And so his splat allows you, you've got it in front of you, Ian, haven't you? Do you want to read out what his splat is?
So you spend it at the start of a stage 2A, a stage 2B, the burster, or an aberrations activation. It gets you +1 speed on your sprint move, increases your AP in combat by 1, and for the rest of the round. And the model doesn't need to test for rampage either. So it's 3 buffs in one go.
Yeah, which means that it's still useful even if you haven't got a rampaging model, so you're not getting dead splats if the model isn't injured. But if you've got a rampaging one, he's going to likely be your go-to one. Right, I'll use the splat on him because the rampage is so risky. Yeah, and he's quite cheap, isn't he? I mean, he's only tactician 1, but he's
18 points. He's a bargain.
Bargain.
Yeah. Given that he's available, he really, really makes 2As and aberrations and appealing options. Just run whole army of big monsters.
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, I mean, the swarms we've talked about, murder birds, or I think we should probably talk about murder birds, shouldn't we?
Fucking murder birds.
Yeah. Murder birds are a bit strong. I'm going to put that out there. They're a bit too strong. I think that's been fairly well recognised and acknowledged.
You love or hate them, or both, maybe. But,
well, it depends, doesn't it? I mean, everybody loves them until they either play them or try and build them. You know, then you start to hate them. They're a bit fiddly as a kit, aren't they? Although lots of people haven't got them because they haven't been available for a long time, because they were in the Warpath Kickstarter, and then they've never been re-released, I don't think. So, or if they have, very small numbers, and then they disappeared again.
I think there was a problem with the mold.
Yeah, and they're made of metal, and I think they are a bit fiddly because there's 5 different sculpts for a pack or something like that. Some very small and some quite large. So there's a lot of sort of, if you're being gamey, you'd take a certain type of murder bird as opposed to the other ones. Just exactly the same profile, but the model's completely different in its appearance. And because they don't shoot, all they want to do is hide, really.
And then again, they are so good even without being gamey. They are one of the best units in the plague list.
So they're quite cheap, aren't they? About 14 points, I think, isn't it?
19 points.
19 points. I should have
14
points. Yeah. but the reason they're particularly nasty is that they're fast.
Yep.
And also they have scout. So they start quite a long way up and they move very fast. They're size 2, which means they survive a little better than other models. And they've got tough. So they can ignore the first successful hit every time they take potential damage. So that means that not only do they get in your grill very quickly, they might not do out a huge amount of damage, but they lock models down and they stick around. So if you get them on something like let's talk about enforcers, because we talked about them a second ago. You stick one on an enforcer with a sniper rifle, they might just bludgeon each other for ages, but that sniper rifle is not shooting anything because he's now stuck with a whole bunch of birds flapping around his head. So they are really good as like a tar pit model. That's the way I sort of look at them. You stick them on something that the enemy then has to deal with, whilst the rest of your army is just walking up the battlefield, because that's what they're doing, isn't it? They're slowing the good units down whilst the rest of your army comes on board.
I mean, in some missions, they could be charging into melee on turn 1.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that when the original missions from the rule book and the Outbreak expansion, all the deployment was on the baseline, but with the escalation rule book, actually Outbreak had new missions as well, didn't it? With the escalation rule book, there are different deployment zones, aren't there? So you've got one like a pyramid, you've got ones in corners. So the distance between deployment zones is now much, much shorter in some missions than it was.
Scatter and divide and conquer, particularly.
Yeah. Which is great because they were designed for that purpose. But with murder birds, it sort of plays right into their hand. Well, they haven't got hands. It plays right into their beaks. Yeah. So what else is there? And so plague can also take striders, of course. We mentioned that you take the mortar. What else have they got that's cool?
Because the strider's only shooting on 6s, you probably wouldn't take the Polaris cannon. Burst laser, maybe, weight of fire and pinning still. I like using the flamer.
Yeah.
Just walk them up there and set things on fire because everything gets set on fire, doesn't matter whether you hit them or not.
Yeah, it's a good evil approach, isn't it, for plague to use flames to do everything. So, yeah.
I will call into question Claudio's reference to them being evil. I mean, it's just a disease. No one wanted to get
They're victims, aren't they? They're victims.
They're just patients, really.
Yeah, well, them being evil is maybe from an outside look. If you're like living in the GCPS, I think they aren't very kind, and I don't think they really go on diplomatic missions. Or that diplomatic
you say that they might
eating
be
brains. Yeah,
it's just a different cultural way of doing diplomatic missions. That's all.
Maybe, yeah. Well, they're diplomatic. Many humans are joining their ranks after the diplomatic mission. So, yeah.
In some ways, they're the most utilitarian society of them all.
Yeah, and they're uniting so many alien races and humans and others together in one.
Absolutely. There's no rigid structure of class systems or wealth or anything like that. Everyone.
Well, you have stage 1, 2, 3s, but yeah. But it's an outside look.
Someone's got to be on top of the pile.
We've talked a lot about speed. Let's talk about the opposite end of the scale. The stage 1A, the number 1 leader.
So
Tactic 2. He's armor 2. He's size 3. He's tough. He survives on 4s. You will not be able to kill this guy. Not now. Not ever. He's the guy who's going to be wandering around through the entire game because you're not going to put enough bullets in him. Because the problem is he's only speed 1, sprinting or moving. He's not shooting. He's going to move 1 cube every turn, unless you save your move dice, which of course you will do. And he's just like impending doom, slowly advancing towards you. And when he gets there, he will kill whatever he gets hold of.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that you're buying him mainly for his Tactician 2, for his Commandos.
And his splat is really good now with escalation.
Mutation.
And I think that's also a good point because you're buying him and maybe he's not even killing a single thing, but he's there. Your opponent is afraid of. Mm-hmm. You mostly save your victory points because he doesn't get killed. You have your Tactician all the way. And then you can grab, maybe if you have one objective closer to your edge, you can go there and all your other stuff can advance and go in the face of your opponent or to the other. So I think it's a really big problem that he's so slow, but you know it.
I like it that he's slow. Yeah. It gives him a real sort of hulking, brooding menace, doesn't it?
It's like a real badass.
Yeah, and if you get a couple of move dice across a game, then actually he is making it there. Then, particularly in some of the newer missions where they're like Scatter or Divide and Conquer, like I mentioned, where there are areas of the map where you can get to. Your opponent has to get to too. So most armies you can't win by sitting back and just shooting stuff. You still have to gain the objective. So you never have to cross the whole map with one of these guys. You just need to cross part of it and kill whatever's in front of you. And he does that very, very well.
Yeah, there's no arguing with him if he's on the objective. The other thing is plague zombies. Plague zombies.
Yes.
Plague zombies are interesting in the game because they're one of the very, very few models that give away no victory points when you kill them. They're easy to kill because they're vulnerable and survive in sixes. But I think they're pretty handy for moving on to objectives. I think they're a really good second wave. You send your 3 A's and your 2 A's out real fast to engage with the enemy, your murder birds, and then have a second wave of plague zombies who just follow up in the void behind and claim those objectives for you because they're cheap.
Because there's zero. Yeah, because there's 0 victory points. Your opponent is quite often going, is there something better I can shoot or deal with? So they tend to ignore them. And then, as you say, they're doing something, moving up the table, or even, they're not even beasts, so they can grab stuff as well, can't they? So, at least I think now, anyway. So, I think because they're really cheap, they're a useful little throw-in. So I think it's not uncommon to see people take 2 or 3 of them in a list, just to sort of have a few extra models. I think people did sometimes try and run hordes of them. That's not that it doesn't work, but it's really hard to make it work properly, I think, because they do have this really nice special ability called Horde, which means that you get a bonus to fight if there's more than one zombie in the cube. But the way it's worded, you have to have a friend in the cube, which means that if you're moving forwards and aggressive, you're going in one at a time. So if you go in and die, you don't get the bonus. If you go in and
difficult, that first one.
Absolutely, it's a timing issue. So getting the first model in, and if he doesn't die, the next one going in suddenly is really powerful. So it's quite good on the defense, but the horde going forwards isn't particularly strong, actually. And yes, you can flood the table with 20 models, but they'll all be dead quite quickly.
Especially if there's more.
They're a good add-on, aren't they? I think running a few of them is really useful. And of course, there's a splat on the one of the leaders,
General.
Yeah, which actually turns enemy models into any model, in fact, into a zombie if someone dies and you have a splat. I mean, that's quite cool because a model that you've just shot, for instance, in his back line, as it were, suddenly now becomes a zombie. That next round will be standing up right in the mix of his stuff, and you're like, what the, sorry, Jeff, what happened to you, Jeff?
Yeah. I mean, they're easy meat, but you've got to spend an activation dealing with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And if you have them in a queue with a sniper or something like that, can't shoot because he's in combat with another zombie. So it's a really effective way to pin down or even so that your opponent has to spread his forces so that they don't stack in the same queue because the same zombies could spawn in there. And then maybe you could work out an option where your other zombies can run in and have a buddy already in the queue. It's hard to pull off, surely, but that's one of the options where it could work a bit better to play a zombie horde. And they don't give any victory points. So you can spawn them without any thought because even the spawned ones don't bring anything.
Guilt-free massacring.
Because they are the bad guys.
We'll just move on now to just one more faction. Everybody's favourite. It's the Marauders.
It's easy mode.
This was like Claudio's face now. Yes, easy mode. That's it. For some reason that neither me nor Ian can understand. People seem to like the Marauders. Claudio, you're just painting your Marauders as well now, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm painting them for the Blackjack Legacy Challenge, and I have a few pieces which were unpainted for a very long time. So I've personally never been much of a fan of them. I don't know why. There are so many options, so many other factions, but they were my number one picked strike force from everyone which I wanted to show the game. So at one point I knew I had to paint them, and then I played with them, and they are really fun, and they are flavorful. They were and are still a bit strong, so that's maybe why other people don't like them, those who don't play Marauders. But yeah,
why don't you give us the background, and then we'll character assassinate them.
Yeah. So Marauders are orcs, space orcs, something like that. You can see that brutish looking.
No.
Okay.
They
look
Gorons.
like. Yeah, they are Gorons, and they look like brutish.
They may look like other IPs.
Yeah. And they use other Marauders use other races as well in their strike team. So they are not only the Gorons, picture those ones, but also like goblins and hulks. So there are a few races in there. The interesting thing is that the Marauders, or the Gorons, were one of the biggest assets for the GCPS. But then they turned into one of the biggest problems of that time in a really, really short amount of time. That uprising where the Marauders, one of the elite shock forces which were used and deployed by the GCPS, that uprising was known as the Mandrake Rebellion. And this rebellion forced the council's hand in the end to get new shock troops, to counter them, to get more or really utterly loyal shock troops. And that's where the enforcer program started. So Marauders are one of the triggers for the now superhumans serving the council. Now they work mostly as professional mercenaries, still deployed by the GCPS and also by some corporations, often if they want some dirty work, which they don't want to be seen with. And those mercenaries, as I already told, use many different races. So like the goblins use snipers, the Gorons shine with their high survivability, their strength. And one thing which is overlooked quite often in the GCPS, and if you have a first glance at their looks, because of their physique, is that they are tactical geniuses. They are really, really elite warriors. Their leaders are really good at evaluating or assessing the situation, and so they aren't only brutes going in and smashing things like Hulk or some other green brutes. So those gaps which were filled with the Hulks walking fire platforms, the goblins and the Marauders and more beasts like their killer dogs everyone loves, help the strike team and help the Marauders to really manage every situation. And also they can trick their GCPS paymasters to think, they still think, or mostly think, that the Marauders are mindless brutes, which they are not. And that's one of the really interesting twists, I think, to this faction and to this race in Deadzone.
Yeah, I think the fluff behind them is really quite cool. You know, they use the goblins as their intermediaries because they talk nicely, and then they play the dumb green grunt sort of thing, and actually they're fully processing how much they're worth and how to get the most deal out of it. It's a really, really nice sort of touch. And I think the three factions we've gone through here, you can see how they're all tied in the fluff. So the plague comes as a big threat. The Marauders are basically used by the GCPS and the Council of Seven to deal with the plague threat because they won't get infected. Then they go AWOL. Then they have to create the Enforcer program. It all sort of ties in just between these three factions, let alone the other factions. So I think they really sort of integrate a nice sort of fluff that comes along with all of these armies. It's just unfortunate that they are really annoying as well.
Yeah, and I think it's also nice that they use like the old equipment, the old GCPS equipment, and that.
Well, that's classic British Empire. That's classic British Empire. You don't give the native soldiery the best equipment. Oh no. So yeah, who hands up if you play Marauders? I know I have played Marauders. So, but I think you're right, Claudio. You said before about they are a popular faction, and if you were to put all the factions out there, they're quite often picked as like for new players. Sort of will say, "Oh, I like the look of them," and I don't know what it is necessarily. Maybe it's just the familiarity across IPs that is attractive. And the models are quite nice as well. So I guess maybe those sort of things, but they are often taken as a first faction, which is pretty good actually, because as I think Ian said earlier on, playing Marauders is
easy mode. I think what it is about them, there's an ease to specializing a force around a specific theme for yourself. So whether that's melee combat or whether it's shooting, there are models in here that are very good at those things, and there are leaders that complement that to really focus that in, so you can create something formidable, either whichever way you want to go, but within the one army list.
So yeah, I think so. They've got quite versatile. They're again another sort of Swiss Army knife, aren't they? Really, they've got some good close combat. They've got some pretty good shooting. Not necessarily the best shooting, but they've got some pretty good shooting, and they've got some quite tough models as well. So. They've got a lot of sort of useful models. In fact, there's almost some go-to models that you pretty much, I wouldn't say auto include these days, but certainly in the early days of version 2, there were some absolute auto includes. You know, half your list would have been picked the same for anybody's. There's been a lot of sort of work to try and give people more options to take. The other thing, so what else do they do well? They survive well as well. They pretty much all survive on 4s, and those that don't survive on 4s have armor. So their ability to sort of stay put on a battle, again, you know, we're joking a bit with the easy mode thing, but it means that they're a little bit more forgiving of new beginner sort of tactical errors or something like that. So you can make a small mistake and you can get away with it. And I think that's important when you're playing with Marauders, because they aren't brilliant at anything like a lot of the factions, but what they do is good. And so staying alive is important for them. So what have we got then as sort of troop options in the Marauders? I think there probably are some go-tos that you see at least 2 or 3 of in nearly every strike force, aren't there?
Well, there's only 3 to choose from. So the Commandos, which are your Goran warriors, survive on 4s, like you say. They're 12 points. They've got rifles, shooting on 5s and fighting on 5s. They're your all-round pretty decent warrior with a particularly good survive stat. I ran a mostly commando force at Franticon this year because I really wanted to try that theme of commando heavy guys. So I took a commando sergeant whose special splat ability allows commandos to reroll a test for shooting, fighting, or surviving. So it gives you a do-over. You can just like, oh, that wasn't a very good roll. I'll just spend a splat and have another go. It's much easier to get lucky when you get several chances at it.
Yeah, if you can react and don't have to act before, if you don't have to say, okay, and now before I roll, I go for the extra die, etc. You can just go, okay, if it goes well, good enough. If not, you can react. And that's one of the forgiving things. You can survive because of your survivability, and then you can always choose with the commandos if you want to go that way or not.
And I really like the Commando models. I think their aesthetic is really good, actually. The sort of like they got full military attire, you know, in a sort of like almost a late 20th century military attire, really, aren't they? With like ammo webbing and stuff like that, and sort of normal. They're not sort of special ops or anything. They're not armored, but they've got sort of. They look like they go to Vietnam or somewhere, wouldn't they?
The Foreign Legion.
Yeah.
The caps and so on. Yeah, and I think that's one of the. I mean, the name Commandos already, together with that like high military, look, is one of the points or one of the driving points maybe why. Why that faction is so loved or often picked, because it's just you have that brutish alien in a really well-known clothing that you know that dude is a specialist. He can do everything. It's like a Schwarzenegger with green skin.
Yeah, every one of them is Arnie. Yeah.
So, what other troop options are there? The other sort of the often seen more than Marauders, I would the Marauder Commandos, I would suggest.
Probably the other one worthy of mention is the Morbeast. I mean, these are plague dogs, but taken up to the extremes. They cost twice as much, so 12 points each. But you're fighting on 4s, which is pretty good. They've got AP1 as well.
Because they've got a mouth drill.
They've got chainsaws.
Yeah,
that could be a driving point.
Absolutely madness, that.
Yeah. And of course, if you want to run a lot of those and have them highly effective, of course they're fast because they're dogs. You take the Marauder Warlord, because what does he do? He gives it, with his special ability, he give any other model in there Frenzy 4. I mean, you basically can't.
Frenzy 4 is unnecessary, isn't it? You're not usually rolling that many dice. If you need to use all 4 frenzies, you've had a bad first roll.
Then it can save your day.
It could, yeah.
With a Morbeast fighting on 4+, it basically means as many dice as you've got, you're probably going to hit with all of them because it's difficult to miss.
I mean, I think you see people generally run a few Morbeasts. 2 or 3 is not uncommon at all. And the reason is they are so good. They will never survive a game. Very rare for them to survive a game, but you don't need them to, because if they're taking down big stuff or scoring early victory points because of the speed, then they're doing their work. And then if people are a bit like the zombies we talked about before, if people are concentrating on killing them, then they're also not concentrating on killing your really good stuff, which you have paid a lot of points for. So yeah, Morbeasts are super good. There's one other option, isn't it? Just to come out in escalation that didn't exist before as a troop.
There is the Goron Auxiliary. Yeah,
he's like just a cheaper version, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still survives on a 4+, but he's got a poor quality rifle, actually called a poor quality rifle.
Doesn't even have a name.
No. And he shoots on 6s, so he's pretty rubbish, but he is cheap.
But I think if you wanted to use them as fighters, close combat fighters, and just to grab objectives, then it wouldn't be a terrible choice, because it's only the shooting that's worse than a normal commando, isn't it? So if you're not interested in the shooting, then you don't need to worry about it. You can take the cheaper option. But then you're right, there's only 3 choices, and then you've got a whole host of specialists again.
Pages and pages of
plenty of options, actually. Too many options. What have we got? We've got the usual specialist, who's just basically a marauder.
Specialist section focuses more on the shooting.
Yeah.
I think Morbeast, your number 1 combat choice. You get more shooting options in your specialists. So you've got Commando specialists, so they can take flamethrowers and HMGs, that kind of thing. Goblin snipers, which at 14 points for a sniper is extremely good value. Yeah, they only shoot on 5s, but that's not that bad. And because they're rolling lots of basic dice. Yeah,
with AP1.
With AP1, yeah. So I quite like those guys. There's a saboteur version of the Goron Auxiliary. So he's got a stun grenade, which is interesting.
And scout.
Yeah.
So he's like a Alpha Strike sort of model, isn't he, really?
You could use those particularly to try and nerf your opponent, getting some strong stuff off early in the game by lobbing a stun grenade at them and just mark them as activated straight away.
Certainly, if you've got other models that scout or use aerial deployment or something like that, taking out that GCPS Ranger or that Pathfinder, even if you haven't killed them, but stopping them doing the one thing they were meant to do on round 1 by hitting them with a grenade or something, that can be a huge difference.
One of the finesse options, which aren't as there aren't as many in the Marauders, because they're mostly straightforward and really good. And I think the Saboteur is a bit trickier to use, but I think if you find that one spot where you can fit or can disrupt your opponent, it can be a really, really good unit. Yeah.
And I think there's not many armies that have got a unit like that. Veermen have got a similar sort of unit as well. But yeah, absolutely, it's slightly more finessed.
And he uses a bow.
So what's not to love, right?
Next on that page is a variant of the Morbeast bomber. So for an extra 2 points, you get a massive bomb strapped to his back.
How to upgrade a Morbeast with a chainsaw in its mouth? Strap a bomb on it.
Yeah,
why not?
So he's just as fast, he's just as good as fighting as your regular Morbeast. But if someone does take him down, and like you said, quite often they don't survive the game. So if they're in the middle of fighting someone and someone fights back, guess what? They just get blown up for their trouble.
I mean, let's face it, if your Morbeast bomber survives the game, you've not played the game right. I mean, his entire thing to do is blow up. He just needs to blow up in the right place.
Yeah, because you can blow up your own guys too.
Yeah.
So
that's
careful.
a risk.
Yeah.
See, piling Morbeasts in to help each other in combat is a great tactic, not with Morbeast bombers. Because once one
Talking
goes,
about chain reactions, right? Chainsaw reactions.
Wah, wah, wah.
I like running them with my Commandos as the fast fight option.
Because again, they absolutely. If you see one of them coming at you, it's like, well, I absolutely have to shoot him down because, once he's in, basically he's blown up that cube at some point, isn't he? Or he's killed everything in it otherwise. So, that is the problem, isn't it? You have to deal with him before he reaches your lines, or sacrifice somebody to get rid of him. It's a real problem. You don't see him being used that often. I think because there's so much competition for specialist slots, actually. There's so many good options in the Marauder army that sometimes you think, I'll take this one because he's more versatile, perhaps, than the Morbeast bomber. But
I think people like taking Morbeast as their troops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What else have we got? Well, should we talk about the Ripper suits?
Yes, let's.
So these are size 3. So they've got loads of wounds. They've got armor as well. They survive on 4s. So these are big hench guys who
only 1 point of armor, haven't they? Which is not huge, but it's worth having.
Paired with the 4-up survive and 4 wounds.
Yeah.
It's
hard to shift them, isn't it? Hard to shift, and they're solid.
And talking about shifting them, right?
Solid.
Yeah, so you can't even disrupt them by pinning them or blowing them up or anything.
You know what you also can't do? You can't even pin them or hurt them if you throw a frag grenade into your own cube. I've seen this dirty trick done a number of times. I may have done it myself once. So if something like a wimpy Kalishi comes into your cube and tries to kill your Ripper Mauler or Rainmaker or whatever, you then get a friend to throw a frag grenade into that cube, blows up the Kalishi, probably killing it, and your Ripper just says, I'm fine. Because I survive on 4s, solid. I've got a point of armor, I'm not getting knocked over. Brilliant. Dust clears, Ripper's fine.
That's like a terrible idea then, doesn't it?
It's terrible.
Why would you do that?
Yeah, I've had that and you just look at it and you go, you swine. You absolute swine.
Or get a Morbeast bomber in there. At least your Ripper won't get thrown away by the explosion. But
they come in 2 variants, of course.
Exactly.
So we've got one that is armed to the teeth with guns. It literally has several to choose from. It's got a cannon with weight of fire. It's got a Hugh beamer with lots of AP. It's got frag launchers for fragging stuff. And a rocket salvo for an indirect shoot. And it comes with all of these as standard.
No upgrades needed.
Insane. No. Shoots on 5s. Pretty good.
This is one of those models that was an absolute auto include in the beginning of version 2, but now has had a nerf's not quite the right word. A rebalancing is probably the right word. So he's gone up a little bit in cost, and I don't think anything's got worse on it, but he's gone up a bit in cost and victory points, I think it was. So you are now paying an appropriate amount for something that's got basically an answer to everything, shooting-wise anyway.
Mm. And the other variant is the combat variant. So this thing fights on 4s, which is really good. Bear in mind, he's got that size advantage as well. So he's getting extra dice in a fight, probably. He gives you a backup tactician as well. So if you lose your lead, you can get an extra command dice from him. AP1 and Frenzy.
You know what I really like about him? He's also got knockback, hasn't he, on his ram?
Yeah.
So what you can do is you can fight someone, push them out of the cube, walk in and fight them again. and then you're charging. How brilliant is that? I could just like walk in, or push people off buildings and stuff, or push people into other cubes with other people. Even better. You can literally like bounce them around.
Especially good if you're fighting against someone who has a really good melee value, like Kalishi. If you have to win the fight, of course. But then if you push them into another building, into a wall, then they have to test against the survivability. So their survival 5 up is then to be matched with the wall or something.
So they're puniness and no armor. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think they're a really good choice. You don't see them taken as often as the Rainmakers for obvious reasons, but the freedom of the extra tactician dice is really good as well, because it allows you to be anything that gives you a tactician dice doesn't necessarily give you extra dice. You can only ever use one model of tactician, but it allows you to be freer with your commander, your proper commander, as it were. So particularly if you are running the Warlord, who you want to get up and fighting, that's actually a little bit of a risky strategy, because once someone gets enough shooting on him or deals with him and he dies, you've lost your extra command dice then. But not if you've got a Mauler on the table as well, and who's also doing work. So you're keeping the options open, as it were, a bit more, aren't you?
Yep. The Hulk. The Hulk is worthy of talking about, of course. The Hulk is basically carrying a vehicle standard heavy weapon. Okay, it's range 12, AP 5.
It's unnecessary, isn't it? You've said 2 stats there, both of which are actually completely unnecessary. You don't need range 12 when the table's only 8 cubes wide, and you're standing in one of them.
Almost nothing in the game has armor of 5.
No, literally nothing, I think, isn't it?
Well, the Peacekeeper Captain with the Defender Shield and 2 of his splats can get up to armor 5.
Oh, right, okay, if he wants to. Well, all right, yeah.
Like your everyday scenario.
Yeah, so completely unnecessary, but anyway.
But what's unbelievable is that he shoots on 4s.
What's even more unbelievable is that nobody ever takes him without also putting a holosight on him. So if you buy,
you make it better, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you got something that's excellent, you make it better by putting an 8-point holosight or 12 points. 8 point holosight, which gives you an extra dice.
Yeah.
So now you've got this big, hard to kill creature, which shoots really well with a massive cannon, shooting with at least 4 dice, 3 base plus the extra one for the holosight. Plus he might also be standing on a building or something like that, or it's just criminal, isn't it?
Yep.
But I'm going to give a little tactical tip to you now. The way to deal with these Hulks is you need something to pin him.
Yeah.
Anything to pin him. This is where people sometimes think about the lowly trooper with his rapid fire laser rifle or something like that, and you think, oh, he's rubbish. Yeah, right, he is a bit rubbish. But all you need to do is get one more success than your opponent. You don't need to damage him, so he's tough and all that sort of stuff doesn't kick in. You just need to get one more success on your dice, and you will always roll 1 extra when you're blazing away. So you're rolling 4 dice. He's rolling 3 as his base survive. Yeah, he survives really good. But if you get a bit lucky...
That's the problem. You've got to be lucky. You have got to be
a little bit lucky.
Weapon that's got pinning.
Or get a suppressive weappen. Like a Plague HMG, which is pretty cheap, and then just pin it. I think that's one of the lessons for Deadzone in general. You don't always have to kill your opponent or the big things of the like snipers. Goblin snipers don't have a good survive, so they die. But Enforcer snipers die. The Hulk doesn't die, but you can pin them. That's like the easiest way to deal with something you don't like and you can't handle.
Unless it's solid or a construct.
Yeah, sure. Which actually, he was back before escalation. So
I think when you talk about pinning things, you don't completely nerf it, but it means that then the owning player has to use a command dice with a shoot dice to do anything with him. So you're denying the option of 2 shots on that model, which is obviously criminal, because he's normal shot and then a a shoot dice one, but you're also taking that shoot dice off of somebody else that you might wanted to use it on as well. So you're cutting down the sort of options. There's no way
Andy,
you can use it on. Yeah.
but Andy, where is the Marauder player getting that shoot dice from?
Oh, well, you could have rolled it. Or
the dirtiest trick in the book.
You could have the dirtiest trick in the book. Yeah, go on. Let's talk about the Commando Captain. Go on.
The Commando Captain,
just filth.
He's Tactician 2 to start with, so he's bringing 5 command dice to the party, and his splat is to steal one of his opponent's dice and use it against them.
Yeah.
So he'll use your own shoot dice to shoot you with that Hulk you just pinned.
Does anyone work for that? Toss it.
I've seen people re-rolling their own shoot, move, and fight dice
so
that the captain doesn't use them.
Yeah.
That's so crippling, and that's why no one likes Marauder players.
No one likes Marauders. Playing on easy mode. Haven't got enough dice of your own, just steal your opponents.
But it's a really, really stylish miniature, and also profile, to be honest.
It's got loads of medals.
So go on, yeah.
It's got loads of medals. No, it's a really filthy trick. It is a bit more subtle than it first sounds, because you have to use the dice you steal at that time. So you can't just steal it from them and not use it, which means that if he's going first, your opponent's going first, he does, it's like, if you've got shoot dice and you're going first, like, well, I'm clearly using the model with the shoot dice, because if I don't, you'll steal my shoot dice. So I might as well take that now, even if it isn't the best option.
But that alone is worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're messing with your opponent on such a scale that psychological warfare in the end.
Yeah, but it's only move, shoot, and fight dice. So the splats and the extra dice and the extra activations can't be stolen. So it's only 3 of the best options on your command dice that can be stolen.
It's very stressful playing against that model. It really is, because the command dice is such a valuable asset, and to know that you're going to get robbed of at least one, could be several in a round. It's harrowing.
But on the plus side, what else does the Commando Captain do?
Nothing.
Nothing else. Yeah, literally nothing else.
Yes, one special rule, which also helps in his tactical genius way. So usually you can only re-roll your command dice if you have more than half of your army or models still left. And he can re-roll even if he's still the last man standing.
Combat tactics. Yeah,
so he's a genius. He's a genius.
He is a genius. But he can't do anything else. He survives well, like all Marauders, but he can't shoot, he can't fight. So really his main thing to do in a battle is to lead from the rear, is to sort of hide out, really.
He'll be found cowering in a box somewhere.
There is no greater joy than killing one. There is genuinely no greater joy. He was like,
when you find him cowering in that box and murder him.
Unfortunately, though, even killing him, his splat still works. His tactical genius lives on.
Why?
Yeah, so he is really great, though. He's probably the most commonly chosen leader for all of those great reasons. He is quite a bit more expensive now than he was at the beginning of version 2 to account for that, both again in victory points and actual points. What other leader option is there then? There's the Warlord. I mentioned him briefly, didn't we?
Yeah. So if you want a combat option, he's a monster, because he's big, he's tough. He fights on 3s with frenzy, and of course he dishes out this splat to give you lots more frenzy, either for himself or for somebody else. So if you want to go around beating people's heads in, he's your top choice.
Yeah, he's a pretty nasty fighter, actually, isn't he? But as usual, if you've got your leader, which is what we talked about with the Mauler, didn't we? If you've got your leader and he wants to get in the mix, he is putting himself in a more vulnerable position. But he can handle it most of the time, can't he? But he does tend to... He can easily disappear off the battlefield, I've found, though. He probably only survives at best 50% of the time, I would think. But if he takes good stuff down with him, then it doesn't matter, does it?
Yeah, he'll do some good work along the way. and he's a popular model as well because he's one of the very old Warpath models, but he still stands up.
He's really nice, a big sort of huge hand, isn't he? Huge claw holding up. Yeah. So what else haven't we talked about? So the
last leader.
The last
leader. One more. One of my favorites.
Go on then.
Bowls. It's a Goblin Leader. The first and only
Goblin Leader.
Yeah, a Goblin Leader. And he leads from the front. He doesn't even have a ranged weapon, so he's a melee leader. But he's in a big suit. He's in an armored suit. It's a salvaged peacekeeper armor from the enforcers. And usually they have a kill switch in there. He managed to somehow salvage it without like triggering it. And so he has armor 2 and is a little beast. He's not that good. He's like still a goblin. But his splat helps him to repair himself or other specialists who use other goblins in those suits, grunt bots, to help them repair their wounds or even don't take any damage at all. So, yeah.
He's only interested in self-preservation. Standard goblin.
Standard goblin. Yeah, and the grunt bots are quite new. They've only actually been out about a year. So when Escalation came out in 2019, so they're really quite nice models. They've got like a nice goblin-y helmet on, and if you take the goblin helmet off, there's a little guy just sitting in there, just driving it. So yeah, they're quite cool, and they're a smaller version of the stunt bots, aren't they? So the stunt bot is the equivalent of a Strider for the Marauders. And that's pretty tasty these days as well. There's been an upgrade recently. There was it was unavailable to buy for a long time because it's quite complicated to make, I think, from a resin point of view. And they've just re-released it again about this time last year with some slightly upgraded weaponry as well. And it's another great option for Marauders to take. They're absolutely stoked with options, really are. And the final thing they can take is they can take more goblins. You can take goblins with a gun track. Everybody loves a gun track, right? So a gun track,
absolutely.
Is a vehicle which does have some limitations. A vehicle because terrain is a big thing in Deadzone, and vehicles have to stay on the flat. They can't go up unless there's a slope, and people don't tend to build slopes because it's a bit hard to build them. If I'm totally honest. So you've got two main options. You've got a Hugh cannon on there, or you've got a mortar. I think the mortar is probably slightly more popular as an option because raining death from above whilst hiding out the back is classic goblin. Classic.
And it's got the range, and being an indirect weapon,
indirect 4 as well.
Even if you missed, you might still kill something.
Yeah, absolutely. And indirect 4 is, if it does hit, it can really mess with people.
Big shell.
And then despite being a vehicle, it isn't really armored or very survivable. It has that hit points because it's size 4, but that only armor 1. So it can be taken out quite easily by 1 or 2 good shots. So being able to hide behind a solid wall, and it's not a big miniature either. So you can hide there and just like rain down destruction with indirect 4 and support your mobbies going in and everything else. You don't even know what you want to kill if you're playing against Marauders because you have the Hulk, you have the mobbies, you have the gun track, you have the captain. And I think that's one of the.
I know what to kill. Hulk. Number 1, only thing. If there's a Hulk, he goes. He's top of the list. Then it's the Morbies. Then it's anything else. It's pretty much it.
There's rarely anything in there that just makes up the numbers, is there? Everything feels like it's the thing that needs dealing with first.
Yeah, there's no zombies in that list.
I think the second option, the mounted HEW beamer is also whatever. The cannon, the big cannon thing. It's also a viable option because now it got an extra die. It's like a holo sight for vehicles, on it because you can't get the height, etc. So if you're feeling a bit lucky and you're risking to go out into a line of fire, you can dish out really, really, really many dice with that and with high AP. But then I think the mortar is taken more often because for that AP you often take a Hulk, and I think that's like the biggest problem for the weapon platform cannon.
I ran it at Franticon with the stabilized Hugh cannon, and it's not bad. It shoots on 5, so yeah, okay. You're starting off with 4 dice. You throw maybe 1 or 2 extra dice with it. You might get a decent shot off, but on 5s, you might just miss anyway. The real problem is it adds 2 victory points to the 2 you've got for the vehicle. So suddenly you've got something that survives on 6s, which is worth 4 victory points when it dies. That's a massive cost when it will get blown up.
Yeah, when you're for the same points, you're pretty much getting a Hulk, aren't you? It's slightly more expensive for a Hulk, I think. Ever so slightly.
Even the Hulk doesn't give away that many.
No, but I mean in points, he's a little bit more in points, but I think he's 1 less victory point, isn't he? He's 3 victory points, I think, a Hulk. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the problem with the human, that the mortar tends to get taken because it brings something that you don't really have otherwise in the Marauders. You've got good direct shooting. The only other mortaring sort of stuff that you can do is with the Ripper Rainmakers, and they're limited to just once per game. This rocket salvo that you've got. So, and if you want to take Ripper Rainmakers, great. But sometimes people think, oh, I don't want to take certain models because I want to do something else with them as well. So the mortar does fit that bill quite nicely. He does one thing, he does it well. And he does it round after round from the base of the board. So, anything else on the Marauders? So what was that in?
I say with your own shoot dice.
So, if you like Marauders playing on easy, honestly,
don't do it.
It's just
Self-worth.
I've got one thing to say. I think we should have a new hashtag here. It's like hashtag real friends don't let you play Marauders.
Maybe exclude goblins. I'm building a goblin Morbius list without any Hulks or any other thing, and I think
we all know how good that's going to be, Claudio.
One man's obsession. Only one man.
I'm not playing easy mode. Sorry, I'm challenging myself.
Oh, great. Well, I think we've gone through some factions here. We've rambled a little bit, but hopefully you've given a little bit of tactical insight and some general overview. I hope you've enjoyed this. We've enjoyed it, haven't we?
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So thanks very much for coming on, Ian. Thanks very much for coming on, Claudio. And I think we'll probably do some others in the future because I'm enjoying it. It's fun.
There's plenty more factions to cover.
Certainly are. Great. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks for watching. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Deadzone is live.